Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gene Salento, and I'm the Dean at the Statler College of Engineering and Mineral Resources at West Virginia University. A sparse crowd here, but this is a town hall. We're going to do an experiment today, and you're it. So let me set the protocols for a little bit. First of all, we all know that engineering education is going to change an awful lot, and its research over the next 10 years as we approach 2030. There's issues with Gen Z and how do you train kids of today and probably the next generation to come, including parents and including parents in that. The cost of education is going up quite a bit. So we have to look at what we need for us to do our jobs effectively as engineering deans. I believe the ASEE role is one of the most important for us as engineering deans in both the education and research. It needs to grow. It needs to become the gold standard for providing data widely for people to use when they do interpretations and use it for various aspects in their workforce. We need to be the focal point for all of this as the deans. We need to represent a diverse set of engineering deans, small colleges, large colleges, privates, and publics. And one of the things we do pretty well is about 85%, but we're still missing a lot of the diversity, even in our own engineering institutions. The role of the Education Data Committee, and I've been a long-term serving member of it and currently chair it, is to represent you as deans in the needs to ASEE for data. We want to help develop data resources that you need. We want to learn what metrics are most needed, and we want to know how to use those data to help measure and impact our changes. So we need all kinds of participants in this. Right now, our data surveys are probably not fully representative of our engineering profession and the diversity in it. So we need all deans to really participate. And I know ASEE and Norm Fortenberry are working on ways to help the smaller schools also be involved and engaged. And that's very important going forward. So I encourage you to submit your data annually for all our various data collection surveys. And I encourage you to join the EDC, the Engineering Data Committee. We're always willing and open to have more participation. So a little bit about the town hall format. And maybe before I do that, I know a number of our members of our committee are in the audience. We have Ian Robertson from the University of Wisconsin. We have Alec Scranton is here. I didn't see him today yet, but from Iowa. Chris Roberts from Auburn. Keith Bowman from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Louis Martin Vega from NC State. Gilda Parabino from CCNY. We have, Jackie El Said, I haven't seen her, from Mary Grove College. Eric Johnson from Valparaiso. And I don't think I missed anybody, but Joe Roy, who's sitting here to my left, is the new director for ASEE Institutional Research and Analytics, and he'll be presenting in a few minutes. A few words about Joe. It's a great addition to ASEE. He joined in December. He has his BS and MS from UT San Antonio, and computer science and statistics, and a PhD in linguistics from University of Ottawa. He's been a senior research officer for AAUP, and like I say, he joined ASEE in December, so we're really happy to have him on board because I think that's an important part of what ASEE needs to do to grow its data collection systems. He's also a University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He's in the linguistics, data analytics area, and he maintains graduate faculty status there. So a little bit now about the town hall. We want to gather data. We want to hear from you today. So this is not us talking up here. Later on, Joe and Don will move around to move the microphone around and get your questions. What we don't want it to be is a soapbox. So we don't want anybody to stand on a soapbox and rail away on us. We don't want it to be a gripe session. We want your input, genuine comments on things that you think we need to do better for ASEE's data collection. It's not a session about for or against rankings at this point in time. We'll get to that in the future. The focus is on what do we, as the ASEE deans, need. And we want to focus on the 70% of things where we are commonality and need similar things, and not so much on that 20 or 30% of things that are our main differences, whether depending on what type of institution we are. So Joe's going to present an overview of what's currently available in ASEE and a future inkling of what's going to be doing as the systems are improved and the IT systems the new platform is installed. And then we're going to have you complete a survey over 5 or 6 minutes. So if you have a smartphone or your laptop, whatever you can use, we'll give you information on that. And once we collect that information, we'll play it back in real time for everybody to see, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. Okay? So with that, I introduce Joe to start our program.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the 3 data collections that we currently run, and then talk a little bit as I'm going through them about some things that we're thinking about for the future. So the largest data collection that we run is the Profiles of Engineering and Engineering Technology programs. We collect enrollments, degrees awarded, directory information, admission and tuition information, research expenditure, every year. We usually publish the printed version of profiles in the mid-summer, but participating institutions have access to our engineering data management system, which I'll talk about in a moment, and that data is usually online within 1 or 2 months of the close of the survey. We have about 300 institutions participating in this. Currently this year, we're working on integrating graduation data, that is degrees awarded data from the federal government, into our system from non-participating institutions with an eye toward making our data more complete, as well as easing the reporting burden on institutions in the future. So we're looking at redesigning the instruments we're using to collect the data to make them more user-friendly for folks entering in the data, and then also to make them more useful to you as well. The other part of this survey, as I mentioned before, is our data mining tool, right? So once institutions participate in this survey and enter all their data in, we roll it over into this data mining tool, and institutions who participate have access to this tool. It allows you to run custom reports of all the data, so demographic data by race, ethnicity, and gender, research expenditure data, and many of the data points are available from 1988 through 2018. The next annual survey that we run every year is our faculty salary survey that collects data by engineering disciplines across a wide range of measures. So we collect not only median salaries from institutions, but also different percentiles for each of these disciplines from institutions. This survey closes this year on April 15th. All participating institutions in this, it's free to participate, get access to the national reports. So these are a set of 4 reports that we run on the data that give you percentiles for public universities, private universities, by discipline and by rank, and then the top 50 US News and World Report, institutions included in our survey, and then all institutions. One thing we're doing differently this year is we're going to produce a second set of reports. So we'll run this traditional set of reports this year, as we've done in prior years, on the submitted data, and then we're incorporating regional price parities from the federal government into our database so that we can produce a second set of reports that weights the data submitted by institutions by the cost of living in each of those areas that the institutions are housed in, to give you a bit of a different, more useful set of data point to compare. Uh, you can purchase the ability to run peer group reports on the salary survey data, and the tool will let you select which peer groups you want, and it'll produce those reports for you. Finally, the third survey that we run every 2 years is our retention and time to graduations survey. Usually it opens every July, every odd year, and closes every August. For this cycle, it'll open July 1st and close August 30th. This allows you to run not only national benchmarking reports for retention and persistence data, but you can also select peer groups to run in this app as well. Finally, what we're here to talk about today, and I'll get into the interactive survey in a moment, is looking towards the future, looking toward what series of data would be most useful for you to have and for us to incorporate in each of these surveys that we're doing. So some of the ideas that we're looking at are up there. So especially linking data that's already collected by the federal government every year and incorporating that into our profiles database is one area we're looking at, but we're also looking at different state agencies that collect employment projections, the federal government which collects employment projections by engineering discipline, and then also looking at being able to do salary equity studies based on the 12 years of detailed salary data that we have by engineering discipline. So with that, we're going to start the more interactive part of our session today. So this involves using this Mentimeter survey tool. If you're connected to the internet, you can go to menti.com and use the code that's up there, 14486. And we're going to give you about 5 or so minutes to complete this survey, and we can see the results in real time. So we'll walk through the results of this. So just to clarify, all the questions are about the college and not the university. So for enrollment, number of faculty, that pertains to your college. We'll give you 1 more minute. Okay, let me start going through some of the responses. Just to be clear, if you're still filling in responses, you can fill in responses as we're going through so you can finish up. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the institutional demographic questions we had at the beginning. So about 86% of you participate in our profiles survey every year. And we have a bit of a majority of public institutions, but some private, some land-grant universities, some historical Black colleges or universities, and then some HSIs and other minority-serving institutions. And then a good spread in terms of size for university enrollment. And then the same for college level enrollment. So a good spread of size in terms of the types of institutions we have. And then again, the same with mostly the majority are mid-sized institutions, but some smaller institutions are in the audience and some larger institutions are in the audience. So I'll hand this part over to Jean. No problem, and you can just
Down there.
yeah.
Okay, so that gives us a picture of the demographics of what we look like in the audience today. So for each type below, how valuable are these data? So you said the down arrow, Joe? Okay. Yeah. I didn't want to go too fast on it. So that you can take a look at how valuable the data are. It seems to be that most of what we collect is useful in everything in enrollment, graduation numbers, for diversity and for our research. It allows us to capture some of the comments that you've given in, and I'm going to need some help reading these because it's too far away, but these will all be captured and we'll use that and we're going to summarize it and we'll provide it in some form out to the deans in the coming weeks. So it'll take a minute to scroll through that. So one of the things that pops out is placement data for me, from what I've seen there. A lot of good responses that will dissect. One of the other ways was to put this into a cloud and dissect it into a few words, but we wanted to get your input first in verbatim, and then we'll parse it out by various sectors that we can use to summarize. So placement data seems to show up to me quite a bit. Joe, does this just continue to cycle, or we see? Okay, for each purpose, how useful is the data that you use? So we're seeing some differences there. So obviously, It's used for peer and aspirational comparisons in college planning, advocacy, advisory boards. I thought that would have been higher. Advocacy with state and federal, lower. Advancement with nonprofit, for-profit corporations, and economic impact in the region. So we see some differences pop up there as well. And then these are some of the comments. In what other ways do you use the data? Trending, I see there. Salary, hiring, comparison to system, share with the broader public. Seems like the reports to Central University, assessing health of your departments. That's a good one. Check accuracy of U.S. news data. I knew that would come up somewhere. Educate faculty, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Have we cycled through there, Joe? Yeah. Okay. All right. What's the rate you have in trust that you have in ASEE for the different data types? So we're interested to see what that is. So most of it looks like it's around a 4, but one of the areas that we have to work on quite a bit is in the faculty size and in the retention data. Just out of curiosity, how many people are using the retention survey? And we'll complete the one that's coming up this July. Do we have a number of people in the audience? Okay. I think it's a very useful survey. I guess we'll be in our 4th iteration of that. We do it every other year on the odd years. For each possible feature in the data mining tool, rate its values. So graphs for historical data. We have graphs for peer aspirational comparisons, all rate about the same. Integration with iPads. And that's something we may want to talk more about. And employment projections by discipline. So they're all rating out around 4. And these are some of the written comments that you provided us. What features would you like to see in the data mining tool that are not there now? Ability to report data easily, that's very true. And Joe is working on that. ASEE is going to have a major upgrade in their platforms for the data, and it's going to probably take, well, best I can tell, it's about 15 to 18 months to get everything online and running. Some things may come on sooner. But once you do that, you'll have a much nicer interface to do this in real time on a regular basis. Joe has a number of good ideas we want to implement, and then also including more data that we can collect and use. So that's one, again, the purposes of just listening to you today and some of the things that you see. And including the trends by state and region that Joe mentioned. So it's going to take ASEE really upgrading their current software to be able to do this. State comparisons. Okay. Is that the last one? Seem to have lost response. Well, we may have almost made it through. Okay. I thought there was a summary there. Okay. So.
Yeah, I think it's the last question.
All right, that's good. Okay. So now that we got through that, what we want to do is open it up to just listening to you so we can record some information from you on the things you'd like to see, or if you want to expand on this, the summaries we have. And again, this has all been recorded, and we'll do a complete analysis offline. So Joe and Dawn are circling around. Any questions or comments?
All right, we're going to start on my side, and then we'll kind of go from one side to the other.
Way in the back, Joe.
Thank you, Gene. I just have a question about the data you said you're going to start reporting in profiles this year. I think you said at the outset we're now going to, for the first time, include data from 140, I think was the number, ABET accredited programs that are not ASEE members. When you report that in profiles, will that be tracked separately? And if not, could it be? Because some of us use those data for looking back 10 or 20 years, historical trends, so it would be nice to track that category separately so we can continue to do an apples-to-apples comparison.
It's a good question. Will the current software allow us to do that, or the ASE to do that, or is it a new system?
I think we'll have to wait for the new system to be able to disaggregate.
It sounds like we'll have to wait, Joe, to be able to disaggregate that.
But,
Right,
I'm sorry. If you're concerned about that, I can provide the 140 iPads IDs for the data that's been integrated into our system so they can be excluded from analysis that you run.
As long as it, if I could just comment, as long as it can be done easily. I was actually asking something even beyond that in the published profiles so that they could be tracked separately so that at a glance, right, any of us could look at it, because there's going to be a step change in the number of engineering degrees granted this year relative to past years, and it would be nice to know what fraction of that is due to the addition of these other institutions to the data set.
Right, so in the engineering by the numbers, we can separate that out from the summary tables.
Mark Christensen, SMU, Dallas, Texas. I would like to encourage us to gather more fine-grained information on research expenditures. Research expenditures has been something that's definition has evolved and different people view it differently. And I think if you break it down, both federal, state, industry, money coming out of endowments, money coming based on salaries, then whatever group is eventually pulling at your data can make those decisions and decide what to lump together. As those definitions have changed, we haven't seen numbers changing very much on what was reporting as you would expect. So I think if you make it a little more fine-grained, we get a better chance of understanding the clear picture.
Thank you.
Have you considered integrating the APLU salary data for all of the engineering programs? Because they're also by the same categories you're talking about. And it's more institutions than the 100 or so.
No, we haven't. I have looked at CUPA HR data and then the Oklahoma Salary Survey that collects data by discipline with an eye towards being able to make comparisons as to what their results are and ours are, but I can take a look at the APLU's data. Yeah.
Say it again.
Yeah, the survey you see coming out of Oklahoma is the APLU. They're just, it's just their data scientists who do that.
Stephanie Adams. I have a question, or actually a compliment first. The data's great from my perspective as a dean. I'd like to see a little bit more disaggregated data from the engineering technology perspective. So in the by the numbers that comes out for the engineering schools, I can go down to a really fine line in terms of enrollment, degrees, and so forth by race, gender, type of school, et cetera. But in the ET side, it doesn't go that far down, so I can just get really high level, and it's not even disaggregated by racial ethnic group. In the ET by the numbers, and if you go into the database, you can't tease it out. That would be most helpful.
Definitely, I agree, and I'll take a look at that. We're pretty deep in our publication process for this year, but if we can integrate that in, I will, definitely.
I don't think that's even in the system, because I can go in the data management database and I can look at all the different ways I can get data, and there is no ET by demographic. There may be NT by gender, but not by race and ethnicity. So I can't even get a table myself and run the numbers that I was looking for. So I'm saying I don't think you even capture it that way.
I think we do collect demographic data, so it's entered in by race and by race, ethnicity, and gender. But I can look at the reports we have in there this week, and if we can integrate and make that report available so that you can run it as part of our ASEE reports.
Hi, Bev Watford, Virginia Tech. There was a committee that was created by the ASEE board to look into the whole data collection activities. Have you guys interacted with that committee, and how has that been influencing the decisions that are being made here?
So yes, I have been in communication with that committee. They're looking at all of the different data points we're collecting, and then also all of the different reports, the logs of reports that are run on the data to see which data points are being used the most with an eye toward reducing the amount of data that we collect if it's not being accessed or reported on at all. I have been in contact with the data task force, and I've given them the usage logs for the EDMS, so they can see over the last 12 years how the data is being used, what kind of institutions are running what kind of reports. That's all been made available to them, and I think we're on a timeline to produce a report for the June board meeting.
All right, Annette Carlson, Cleveland State University. This might be a question based on my own, me being very impatient with some software, but when I was trying to use it, I wanted to export it so I can kind of export the data so I can play around and plot it the way I wanted. Maybe I just missed how to do that, but is this new version going to be easier, a little bit user-friendly to play around with?
Yes, I would say so that you can also download CSV files from the engineering data management system. So of the reports that you run to feed into other programs, either Excel or Tableau or R. So the current system will let you export the data just in one format, though.
You got to get your side excited, Joe.
Oh, come on.
Darrell Pines, University of Maryland. So Greg Washington's been showing these charts of high school enrollment or college-ready students at the high school level about to decline across the United States. So it would be nice going forward if we can start getting data on admissions to engineering. So applicants, number of applicants, so we can track this data relative to high school students not maybe going into, that are college ready, that declining, and see if it's happening to engineering programs, just by the number of applicants, and then hopefully also by the number of admitted students as well. So I don't think that's hard data to gather, but it'd be great if we could start tracking that over the next 5 years.
Is there something nationally we can get access to?
Well, so I believe our profile survey collects a number of applicants and newly admitted students. It may not be so easily available in our data mining tool. You can see it in the profiles.asee.org website, but it requires you to go to institution by institution. So yes, definitely we're working on incorporating that into the reporting tool as well.
So Larry Whitman, UA Little Rock. I just want to say the same thing, but don't forget graduate student. The same information would be great for graduate student admissions as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anyone else?
I will say that the data mining tool is a bit clunky to use. You really got to navigate it and spend a lot of time to download through the CSV files. But I think going forward, once we get the new platform that ASEE has been talking about, they have some vendors they're looking at, and get that system up and running, I think you'll find a lot better access. I believe the ASEE data goes back to the mid-1990s right now, but there are some differences depending on what year you look at because of changing definitions. So one of the things we'll do in the new system is make sure everybody clearly understands what drop-downs. You can look at what the definition is for the data you're about to put in. I think as it depends highly on what schools, who they use to input the data. And I think having access to iPads is going to bring a lot of data in that will help us. It may require us to do some definitions, I think as Joe was alluding to in the back here. So you may have to look at things going forward in time as opposed to being looking back all the years in the past. And I think one of the other things we're going to have to talk about is, I think ASEE originally was set up to do things on departments, and I think we have to be very careful in terms of how we input our data for faculty, enrollment, and degrees by discipline as opposed to departments. I'll use the example of, say, civil and environmental engineering. There's civil engineering, so sometimes these departments, when you put the data in there by that, you try to do some analysis, you'll find out that you're dividing by zeros because of the way the data were put in. So it's very important that we make sure our definitions of disciplines are clear. And that's another thing that the committee is looking at right now is the iPads definitions and the zip codes, I should say, not iPads. Zip code definitions relative to ASE definitions so that we could map things better going forward. So for example, if you have a civil and environmental engineering department, you have environmental faculty and civil faculty, and they're not coded that way, so then faculty salary surveys could be lumped in as a civil engineering, even though you have it broken out by different faculty expertise within the department. You can have that with other departments as well. So faculty surveys, enrollments, and things like that. One question I have, I'd like to get some audience input in. We have been talking about collecting data for faculty salaries and numbers for teaching faculty and research faculty. And one of the things that bogs down the discussion a lot is how people call them different things. Some of these are non-tenurable ranks, but promotable. Others are not in some schools. So we need to get a clarification of what definition do we use for research faculty and teaching faculty. So where most schools, for example, a teaching faculty member may be an assistant, associate, and a full professor and promotable through those ranks. Is that first of all important to you? And if so, can we come up with a clear definition that would help us to capture that data? Same thing for your research faculty ranks. Any comments on that or input?
Emily Allen, Cal State LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you might want to collect from many people their definition of non-tenure track, or maybe they have 4 different definitions, and just kind of collect it from a lot of people and then perhaps synthesize it into several categories, because depending on whether you're a unionized faculty, I mean, there's just lots of different ways these are defined, which make them more or less comparable to each other. For example, in the question about what else would you want to collect, I had put percentage of courses taught by non-tenure track faculty. In that case, I'd be happy to lump in everyone who isn't a tenure track faculty. But there might be other comparisons people want to do where it matters if that person is sort of tenurable, but I know some systems have lectures that have permanence, but it's not tenure. So I would collect everybody's set of definitions and see where they overlap and come to some compromise that people could live with.
Good suggestion. We'll have to sort through that. We've been trying to work through that on the committee, and there's so many definitions that people use that we haven't been able to get a common, clear set that will work for everybody. It's the same thing, for example, with our retention data we collect. We do a pretty good job at ASEE for retention data for about 85% of the schools, but we're not hitting all the schools because the way some students come into a program, we do well with the first-time full-time freshmen, but when students transfer in from branch campuses or transfer to the main campus in some other way, we're not capturing that data nearly as well as we would like. So it all comes down to the definitions. If you don't have the right definitions, you're not going to get a very good data set. So we'll try to collect data from you, and if anybody wants to send us your definitions, feel free to send it to me, and we'll sort through that. And then we'll also, as I said, we captured all this information. I think your written comments, which we didn't clearly go through in any detail, we'll see what kind of commonality is in that data to go forward. And then we're planning on maybe a little bit more focused session at the annual meeting to talk about some follow-up to this in more details. So we may run a similar session, the annual meeting and we were talking about maybe doing it for your associate deans and for your department chairs that maybe attend the annual meeting to find out what kind of data they might want to see going forward as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Emily said. I agree exactly what she's saying. We should collect how different institutions are defining their non-tenure track faculty. Some institutions use a lot of part-time faculty. Sometimes that's called adjunct, some part-time. And when are they used? I mean, personally, I think using these part-time teachers for upper-level courses where they come in as experts from local industry, for example, is great. But if you have to use them for introductory level courses, it might not be so great. So there are a lot of details there. Now, for me, it would be good to see that data when I go to my provost and say, we need more full-time faculty. So I think more and more in academia, courses are taught by non-tenure track faculty, either they're full-time or not. So I think that would be very useful to start collecting that data.
I agree.
And just based on your comment about students also, yeah, transfer students, a lot of us probably graduate more students than we have incoming freshmen, meaning we have a large body of transfer students, and that's not really captured in the data for retention, which of course the federal government doesn't ask, but maybe we should start asking that.
Any other questions? If not, so I'm not opposed to early conclusion. We want to run this as an experiment. Like I say, you are the experiment to see how this might work. And when we walk around as committee members, we hear from different deans anecdotally about what they like or don't like. So it's been hard to get a clear picture of what we need. And I think we're going to need to get that more focused so that when we talk to U.S. News and World Reports of the world, that we have a clear focus of what we need and what we want to provide. So I encourage you as deans to get engaged in the data committee and in participation in completing all the surveys that we do send. I know there's a little bit of cost to it, but I think as a profession we need that, and we need to make sure we're hearing from the diverse group of schools that are within ASEE. And again, we all have the goal to really make ASEE the gold standard, and that we can't get there without your help and participation. So with that, Joe, unless you have anything else you want to add at this point? Or Dawn or Joe?
Nope.
Thank you for your participation. We'll use the data.